This podcast is for singers who have music in their soul and want to be in the spotlight. We are INVICTA Vox Radio.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of INVICTA Vox Radio. We are your hosts as always, Mike and
Angie Lee.
And last episode, we started this conversation of timing and how important it is as an artist to really be concerned with timing and to really think about it and not just have it be this factor that goes unnoticed or unthought about. But it really is very important. So today I want to continue that conversation. And last time you brought up 3 points, and we're going to focus on those today. But real quick, I just want to kind of set the frame on why I wanted to push those 3 points to this episode. And it has to do with just, it's a very big topic, and a topic me and you have talked about quite a bit, hanging out in the kitchen at the end of the day, where a lot of these ideas and conversations usually start out at.
Yep. And
I think at one point it was when Fetty Wap was really popular, and I was just like, yeah, you know, would Fetty Wap have been popular in the 1950s? Would he have been popular at any other point in time other than what he is right now? And this principle can really work for all kinds of genres, right? Like even before this episode, I brought up the same thing about Metallica. And Metallica is obviously, they're an icon in the metal world.
Yeah.
But again, that type of music wouldn't have translated in the 1950s, 1940s, 1960s.
1920s. Anytime before it hit, it would not have translated. It was too hard, right?
Right.
Or you could even flip that and say, would Frank Sinatra, who was huge in the 40s and 50s, and we can credit him for like most of our Christmas music that we listen to that are it's traditional, you know, Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra, would they hit now?
Right.
With that same sound and genre, you know? And so it's interesting. Or you actually compared Metallica to the Beach Boys, right? You're going, would if you took that Metallica back to the time the Beach Boys were hitting, would they have hit?
Right, and, which was like mid-50s.
Right, or if you vice versa that and you go, okay, fast forward for Beach Boys, if we took the Beach Boys and put them in today's market, would they hit? When they were the boy band back then, you know, and you got the Beatles and all that, would they hit? Would the Beatles hit now? That's hard to, you know, say, even though they paved the path for rock music, they're the founders of it in the way we see it today. They were huge and trailblazed that.
Yeah, but if they were just starting out with those songs right now and putting them up on Spotify, would they get the traction that they had back then?
Would they be international superstars? It's just so crazy to think about that. And it's hard to say, you know, we can't say that we know that for certain, but it's just really interesting because so much of success in music has to do with timing. And so much of it has to do with being relevant to the industry. That's a big thing. And also, if you miss the mark completely, or if you get out in front of it and trailblaze like not the Beach Boys, those guys did.
Those guys.
I've got Beach Boys firmly planted in my head.
That's okay. Once it's in, it's hard to get.
Oh my gosh. I'm just hearing Barbara Ann in my head right now. Oh, shoot.
But so really last time, and I want you to bring up the 3 points that you brought up last time, and this all has to do with how do you set up your music, or what are you thinking when you set up your music in relation to what's going on right now, right? And your 3 points were, one, do you just make the music you love that's just...
And you don't pay attention to anything that's going on. You just do what you like.
Yeah, that you're just digging whatever it may be. 2, do you try to catch the trend that's going on right now, right? Like, Are you trying to hit that trend?
And you're usually piggybacking on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we have so many young people here at the studio who are coming in and want to be serious musicians, they're all, you know, when Billie Eilish launched her album last year, they were all obsessed with it. And so everyone came in and sang her songs. And then for a while, all of the songwriting I was hearing with all of our young artists sounded like Billie Eilish, right? Do you jump on a trend that is now happening? And that was fresh when she dropped it. Now, obviously, it's not as fresh. But do you jump on that and just try to capitalize on all the people who are listening to Billie and do stuff just like her? Or no, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a current trend, following a current trend, trying to be relevant to the current market.
And then the third one is seeing where music is at and then taking your best guess at what the next trends are going to be and trying to jump into the next trend before it gets there.
You want to become the trailblazer.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So you're trying to lay the framework, get out the new sounds, because there's always sounds that are applicable to each like fad or genre or where everything's going, right? Depending on like whether it's certain amounts of synth and electronica or if it's going to real instruments. And are you going to try and like predict the future and jump into that and start creating the sounds that you see as the next wave?
Right. And just to go out in front of this, we're going to circle back to this thought, but what path you pick and the timing that you're going to focus on for your own music really in large part has to do with where you want your music to go. So just kind of be thinking about that. Where do you see yourself as an artist? If you have ultimate success of where you want to be as an artist, what is that? What does that look like for you? Because there's so many levels of success in a career in music, right? If you can pay the bills with the music you create and you're making that kind of money to have a house or an apartment and a car, and you can put food on the table, I feel like that's success. That's a level of success in music. So whether it's that level or you want to be a huge superstar, think about that for just a second and think about ultimately where you want to go with your career, because what that looks like out in front is going to help you pick kind of the path you want to take with that and how you're going to time things. And, you know, going back to the podcast episode from last time, talking about when we're launching music, are you a superstar? Are you an independent artist? You know, it all has to play into that. So now let's reel this back and go through our 3 different kind of options.
Yeah, let's run like pros and cons
of
for
both
each.
of them, because depending on where you want to go as an artist, you're going to kind of pick which one you want to be focusing on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, and we can just talk pros and cons of each one of the 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like what it helps you with, what it doesn't. Anyway, so let's go back to the first one and say you're just going to make the music that you love, that you don't care about trends. You're not trying to jump in front of anything. You're just going to make the music you love, right? Which pro has to do with that inner circle that we were talking about.
Of value.
Of value, where we're saying, hey, start by making yourself happy. Start by finding something that brings you value, that you feel like is authentic to you. And that'll give you the truest sense of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely, I think, the biggest pro of kind of taking number 1 and just making it all about what you love and what you want.
Now, the con to that is maybe it resonates with people, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah. If you don't have your eyes on the industry at all, then you know, you're not relevant to anything that's going on right now, and you're not even trailblazing because you're not intentionally trying to get out there. Yeah, it's going to be something that's most likely going to be underground, kind of progressive for what's happening in the industry at the time. And you are going to affect just the people who are like you, which if that's all you want, if that's success to you, then I think that's great.
And I think there are still people who have actually become superstars in that model, but it's less likely, right? Most of the time it's like, hey, I'm going to do this because I love it. I'm going to find the other people who love it. And then if it takes off, it takes off. But I'm just going to jam and do what I love because I love it as an artist. And then whatever comes of it, comes of it.
Yeah, it's your likeliness of having uber success in that is not as high because, again, it's not intentional. You're not setting your sights on, okay, I want to get out there and make a huge movement in music. Again, you do have the potential to do that because you are unique in what you're doing by kind of not paying attention to what's going on. But yeah, it's definitely more likely that you're just going to kind of sit in your world and be there.
So this second one, right, trying to chase the current trends. In my opinion, this is the worst option to take.
I agree. But it's also the hardest one. It's the one that most people fall into.
Yeah.
Because as an artist, when you're a developing artist, you're so influenced by the music around you. And we even start that journey here when people come in as new artists and they're trying to figure out what kind of music they want to do, and they're trying to figure out who they are as an artist and what their identity is. And so oftentimes we start that journey with, who are your current influences? Who are the people that you would go tour with? Who are the people you'd open for? Who is going to be on the same playlist as you, right? And it's important to understand that, but people don't move beyond that most of the time. Most of the time they just stay right there and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so obsessed with Billie Eilish's music. I have to create music just like Billie Eilish. And problem with that is that by the time you get your music out there, her stuff's already old.
Yeah, and I think that's the worst part about it. And again, yeah, this is where a lot of musicians or people who are like, I'm going to make it big, this is where they initially jump to. There's this initial desire to just get with the trend, ride the wave, and like, okay, this is what's most likely going to make me famous. And you kind of push aside what you really love about things, and you almost fabricate a sound that's meant to make you famous rather than what you actually enjoy. And so it takes you the furthest away from what we were actually just talking about. And
you become a copycat.
Yeah, you become a copycat. And then again, like you were saying, unless you're starting right at the beginning and can get the music out quickly, you're going to end up being behind the wave. So
you're not going to catch the wave.
Yeah.
You're going to just drown in the wake of it.
So, yeah. So if you've ever been in the ocean, it's kind of like you're standing out there trying to catch the wave to ride it, but it's already broken, right?
Mm-hmm.
The wave's already broken. You're just standing in the foam and rolling
just
around
like you over.
that.
It just tugs you right under. Or like if you go boating, you're on a lake going boating. You know, when you're wakeboarding, you want to like hit the wakes. You want to be with the wake, but you know, you let go of the rope, you just get pulled right under the water. You fall behind the wake. So it's the same thing. Like, are you going to hit it at the right time? Most likely not, if you're just following a trend. And that's the hard part again, because that's the place that most artists get sucked into, is what's currently going on. Okay, I'm going to just do what everyone else is doing. Even if you have multiple influences that are influencing your music, that's better, because then you can create a more eclectic sound for yourself. But eventually we want to move on from that and go, okay, but what's my sound within that, right? What is my unique sound in this genre with these people?
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to look at that scenario. And now I want to just transition quickly into the last one.
Yeah.
Right? So, okay, so
Trailblazer.
Now you're trying to
number 3.
Trailblazer. You're trying to jump a future trend, right? So,
and this can either go really right or really wrong.
Well, but this is kind of the blend between the two.
It is,
right?
For
so
sure.
This is really the hybrid. This is the in between. So again, going back to that wave, like say you're a surfer, you're looking at where the current waves are breaking, and you're kind of anticipating where it's going to go next, right?
Right.
And the thing is,
so that you can catch it.
Here's the real thing about the music industry. There's no guarantees on anything, right?
No.
So you should make music that you love, and this is where we went back to that the 2 rings of value, first for yourself, then for other people. And in this model, you would kind of take what you already love, right? Like your influences, the things that you love about music, bring your own artistry to it, but then also take some of the modern trends and see what's kind of fringe or what's working that you feel like will run a lot longer, right? There's kind of niche sounds, and then there's timeless sounds. And so using that to kind of work your way where you think is out in front and see if you can't catch something.
Well, and pay attention to the industry. And if you're newer to it and you haven't been paying attention to it for a couple decades, go back and look at what has trended. Look at the path that different types of music has taken when what was popular, because it seems like there's always one genre that's really like the masses are just loving at some point in time.
Oh, yeah.
At any point in time. And Mike and I, this is not factual at all. There's like no studies done on this, but this is just purely our observation. And that is, we see things cycle about every 10 years where they go through a cycle and they come back and hit hard again. And I don't know if that's intentional in the industry or if that's just kind of the cycle we see.
Yeah.
But look at the journey that boy bands have taken. Right now, there's not really a boy band that everyone is head over heels about.
Right. The closest thing would be
The Jonas Brothers coming back.
Yeah, or that K-pop band.
Or K-pop stuff, right.
But even that, I feel like it's hit its peak and it's kind of
on its way out right now. But if you look back to the 90s, you had like Boyz II Men in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And All For One and all those bands. And then breaking into the early 2000s, about a decade later, you see Backstreet Boys and NSYNC surge up. And then it kind of fizzles out. They died out. And then right at 2010, you see One Direction coming out.
Yeah.
And the Jonas Brothers and like all those guys coming through. It fizzles out. Now we're in 2020. We're due. We're due for a boy band.
Yeah. So essentially, if you're listening to this podcast, go form a boy band.
Right now. So you see that with boy band. The one that we've been calling lately that's way overdue is rock music. Because you look at the mid 2000s and rock was hitting super hard. It was like really mainstream. You go back and you go 10 years before that, mid 90s, grunge.
Yep.
Yeah. And you can go back and you can go through the decades and
mid
go, whoa.
80s, that's when you're rocking a lot of your hair bands.
Yep. And they started to fizzle out going in the 90s. So it's kind of like the mid decades that you're seeing rock music really take over. The interesting thing is that the 2010s, it was more of the indie rock stuff that was happening.
Yeah.
But we haven't had like a true rock surgence. We're overdue for rock music.
Right. For popular rock. There's always been like the fringe stuff, metal, death metal.
But like we're talking like mid 2000s. Well, it was really like 2007, 2008.
But yeah, where rock really takes
emo rock was huge.
The forefront and kind of overrides pop at that point.
It did. Pop rock was it. And you see bands like Paramore and all those kinds of guys popping up. And it hasn't happened yet. So Mike and I have been calling rock's overdue. And you see, and so we're pointing out this trend. So everybody go jump on rock music too. You see this trend now with artists like Machine Gun Kelly, who are now putting out music that sounds just like Blink-182.
Right.
It's crazy.
It's a very mid 2000s feel.
Yeah.
So essentially, if you're listening to this podcast,
and that's
form
early.
a rock boy band.
But it's interesting because if you pay attention, you can look back through and say, okay, what are we due for?
Right.
What are we due for? Because just like fashion, look at what's going on with fashion right now. It's got that cycle. It's taking cycles and we're going through different things and we're influenced by different decades and they always come back and they always pop up. And fashion actually moves a lot faster than music. Even in our digital world, it moves faster. We have fast fashion and it comes through. But it's interesting to note that these trends are happening. And if you are paying attention and you go back and you do your research, then you can actually make a much more intentional decision if you are wanting to be a trailblazer. And this is that perfect storm of I'm creating music that I still absolutely love. And I'm so into this and I want to have a career in this and I want to be successful with this while I also have my finger on the pulse of where I think it's going to go.
Right.
And if you can have that perfect storm come together for you, like you said, Mike, there's no guarantee that anything is going to happen.
Yeah, if anybody could predict that, they'd be a bajillionaire.
But it definitely increases your chances and at having some sort of success with that. And so those are the 3 levels. And do you feel like we covered level 3?
Yeah. Like I said, I just think it's the hybrid of the two, right? Where you're focused on what you love, you focus on your own sound and things like that, but you're also keeping one eye on where you think it's going to go and trying to incorporate elements of that, right? Like
be aware of the present, of where it is now and where it's going to go.
Right. Like I love rock music. These are my influences, but this is where modern rock seems like it's going to land.
Right.
Right. Because again, if you go through the time periods, let's just take rock music, right? Like mid 70s. So mid 60s, you got the Beatles. Right. Mid 70s, you're rocking like Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. Mm-hmm. Mid 80s, you're more Def Leppard, Scorpions.
Yeah.
Things like that. Mid 90s.
And those guys were selling out, fields and fields of 300,000 people at their concerts.
Right. Mid 90s, you're more into your Nirvanas and Alice in Chains and
Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, all that, all that good stuff. And then you get into your 2000s rock.
Yep.
Right. And so you kind of have to look at
Your
each
emo rock
generation.
in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, your emo rock, and then in 2015 we had nothing.
Where'd it happen to all the good rock music?
But
yeah, do you know what happened? Indie rock happened.
yeah, it kind of got twisted, but
it was great. It was still a thing. It still happened.
But
good for them.
But yeah, just take a stab at where you think it's gonna go, and just have fun. This is one thing that no matter what's going on, always have fun with the journey. Take the timing as seriously as you can, but don't stress yourself out over it. Just to understand it does play a role. It is an important factor.
Be intentional. Have awareness.
Artistry is meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to just add fulfillment and enrichment to your life. Don't bank everything on trying to be famous.
No, yeah. And that's why at the beginning I said, where do you actually want to go with your career? Because if you want to just make really niched music and have a very specific audience and be able to just pay your bills off your music, then, number one is where you could be. Just learning how to dial in your marketing for your cool, different weirdo sound and go with that. Go with your weird. Market that. Get it out there. That's awesome. And so it's really important to know where on that spectrum of your music career equals success for you, so that you can be very strategic and intentional with what you're doing instead of just randomly doing stuff and putting things out that may or may not work for you.
All right. It's getting to that time of the episode where we wrap it up
with a question.
So what question do you pose for people to either put in the comment field or write
their journal?
In their journal?
What I want to ask you guys is where, if you know where you want to go with your music, if you don't, go back and listen to episode 2 and listen all the way through. But if you know where you want to go with your music and ultimately what means success for you with your music career, what path is the right path for you? Are you going to be 1, someone who just focuses on what they want to do? 2, someone who's chasing current trends? Or 3, do you want to be a trailblazer and keep your finger on the pulse of where you think it's going to go with that happy blend of you being your unique weird and you being relevant to the industry?
Yeah, and just because we said, hey, I see number 2 as the least
doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Beneficial option. Don't be like, oh, well, they said it wasn't good. I mean, if you feel like that's your path, then just say, hey, I'm all in on number 2. You
piggyback on Billie Eilish's coattails.
You guys are wrong. I'm going to do it. So it doesn't matter. Just be real with yourself on what you see as the most beneficial path for you and go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, share it up, subscribe. Let's help all the artists in the world who want to do this for real.
And until next time.
Peace.